ISIS is a brutal and unforgiving terrorist organization. They use force and warfare to establish a theocratic reign over as much of the world as possible. ISIS believes that they are initiating a holy war in which they are supposed to kill everyone who isn't Islam and defies their belief. ISIS uses the jihad to justify the murder of more than 23,600 civilians in their efforts to take over the world. So far, they have accomplished gaining control over large areas in Syria and Iraq, although they also control smaller areas in Lebanon and Jordan. One of ISIS's many war tactics is suicide bombers. These are people who volunteer to end their lives for the potential of bringing about the apocalypse. No adult is forced to become a suicide bomber. It's a choice completely of the person's own volition. When a person joins ISIS, a clerical class is held. During that class, they ask, "Who will be a martyr?" Some will inevitably raise their hands and will be separated. Here is a man who was arrested before he could fulfill his duty to the Taliban.
Behind these high walls at Pulachaki prison, among the 7,000 inmates, are several men who say they're hell-bent on being terrorists. We've come here to meet a confessed would-be suicide bomber, one of hundreds now locked up behind bars. 25-year-old Ruhala believes he was carrying out God's will when he and his friends planned an attack on American soldiers in Nangarhar province. He says he agreed to wear a suicide vest and kill as many foreigners as possible. It's a special feeling that comes to you when you are ready for a suicide attack, he tells me. No one can stop you. No one could stop me. That is, except the law. When police arrested him 5 months ago in Jalalabad during the planning of the attack, he's now awaiting trial. Proudly a member of the Taliban, Ruhala says no one encouraged him to do this. Look at our situation. The foreigners kill our people, they insult our religion, burning the Holy Quran and making cartoons of our Prophet Muhammad. If we don't defend Islam, then we are not Muslim. Suicide bombings and other attacks are now daily occurrences in the war in Afghanistan. And the methods of the insurgents are constantly changing, according to the prison boss, General Khan Mohammed Khan. The enemy don't use their old tactics. Now they use women, sometimes children and teenagers. They even get dressed up in military uniforms. They don't fight face to face. They're cowards. While the Taliban denies recruiting children as suicide bombers, the facts tell a very different story. Authorities say just a few days ago, a 10-year-old orphan boy managed to escape from insurgents who were going to make him wear a suicide vest so he could blow himself up in front of coalition troops. Ruhala has a 4-year-old son who he says he loves and misses very much. When I ask him how he'd feel if his child was used as a suicide bomber, he tells me if he wants to be a suicide bomber when he gets older, well then no one can stop him. If he follows Islam and does it for Islam, then that's a good thing. At times he speaks with hatred in his eyes, and then there are moments when he smiles, explaining this is all a test from God. Our real life starts after doomsday, so this is not our real life. This world is a paradise for pagans and a hell for Muslims. We just need to be patient. The Afghan intelligence service and armed forces say they have foiled dozens of attacks in recent months. And while that's an encouraging sign, Ruhala says there are thousands of others just like him, ready to put on a suicide vest and die for their country and their religion. Anna Corin, CNN, Kabul.
Even though that man was part of the Taliban, ISIS uses many of the same tactics and has nearly the same frame of mind. They believe that when they kill themselves through suicide bombing, they will be martyrs and are honored by their God and followers of Islam. This is why ISIS recruits children to become suicide bombers. Some children are kidnapped from towns that were taken over by ISIS, but others are from families who willingly gave up their child so that he or she might end up in paradise. These kids are placed in camps where they are trained to become and have the mindset of suicide bombers. These camps teach the children that they are worth nothing more than ISIS's overall plan. Here's a kid who escaped his fate.
Overseas this evening and to a chilling image. Authorities say they stopped a child suicide bomber moments before he detonated his explosives. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Terry Moran with the images and the story of a father who sent in his son.
The drama unfolded on a darkened street in the city of Kirkuk in northern Iraq. Two police officers desperately holding the suspect, arms outstretched. And he's just a kid, standing there stripped and scared. You can see the fear in his face. And strapped around his torso, the suicide bomb. Carefully, the bomb is removed. And the boy rushed to safety, surrounded. His cries piercing the night, and then into custody for questioning. His bomb detonated by an explosives team. He is 12, maybe 13 years old, police say, and he told police his own father, an ISIS commander, sent him and his brother on their suicide missions. His brother blew himself up elsewhere in the city. All this less than 24 hours after that horrific suicide bombing at a wedding in Turkey. The Turkish president saying the bomber there might have been as young as 12, but officials now hedging on that claim. There's a long and bloody history of using children as suicide bombers by ISIS, by the Taliban, by Boko Haram in Nigeria. The UN says the tactic is on the rise around the world. David?
Terry Moran with us tonight. Terry, thank you.
Suicide bombings have been the source of many recent terrorist attacks. Tragedy after tragedy have befallen numerous innocent people because of these bombers. ISIS has attacked many countries multiple times. Here are the ones primarily attacked by suicide bombings this year: Libya, Turkey, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Belgium, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, and Pakistan. ISIS has attacked so many countries within the last year, many of these attacks go nearly unheard of, including this one.
ISIS is claiming responsibility for an attack on a peaceful protest. We now know that more than 60 people were killed and more than 200 wounded. The terror group's media wing says that two fighters basically detonated their suicide belts at a Shiite gathering. A journalist who was at the demonstration tells us he saw tens of bodies on the ground, some of them covered in blood, and he saw hundreds of people running from the scene. Senior international correspondent Nick Payne-Walsh joins us live now from Beirut. So, Nick, we know that this was not the Taliban. We know that ISIS has claimed responsibility. When you look at it in context, though, this terror attacks in Kabul, when you look at it in context, is this really the right time for U.S. troops to be reducing their presence in Afghanistan?
A difficult question to ask. Obviously, as we've known, America's longest war in its history no longer has much of a public appetite to be sustained, and that's the reason why we've seen a drop in troop numbers in the past years. There was always a timetable Barack Obama put on the surge he put into Afghanistan, but the reduction that was expected at the end of this year, down to about 4,000 to 5,000, is not going to happen. They'll stay at round about 10,000, and effectively Barack Obama is passing the decision about what to do in Afghanistan on to his successor. Now, the question really is, what could the US do? Well, the 10,000 there are more involved in the counter-terror fight, involved in training the Afghan police and military there, trying to get them up to scratch to the job of securing Afghanistan for themselves. There have been many questions, though, frankly, particularly given the extensive death toll in the past year amongst the Afghan military about how capable they are of securing the country, particularly in the face of a resurgent Taliban. But an instance like this, where you have ISIS so ruthlessly able and desirous of killing civilians massed together in central Kabul in a peaceful demonstration like this, there is not an awful lot, frankly, that you can do to prevent this kind of massacre.
ISIS has attacked the world so many times, only a few stand out. But all these people who have been killed have people who love them. ISIS has shown that they have no respect for human life and will do anything for their cause. Most Muslims are not part of ISIS, but around 8 million people are part of the organization. There is a need for caution, but no need for mass hysteria or Islamophobia. ISIS is a threat to the world, but there's no need to drastically change our lives because of them. The world needs to be more accepting of refugees because their lives have drastically changed and there's no going back for them. Whether it be because they weren't safe in their homes or were forced out, they need our help because many people are too scared to give it to them. ISIS has changed our lives for the worst, but our nation and our world can come together and overcome them.